for this session is the thin line in providing generic and specialist support to students. Please welcome the speakers for this session, Mr. Michael Joyce, a learning advisor of the Pathway program here at JCU and an acting head of the ELPP program, and Dr. Stanley Liu, a learning advisor for statistics and mathematics, also here at JCU. The co-presenters in this session include the peer tutor coordinators of the EMAS peer tutoring program at JCU, Ms. Kayun Yap, Jesslyn Felicia, and me, Kajol Arcot. A little bit about the speakers of this session. Mr. Michael Joyce is gained his master's degree from Temple University and has taught in various countries such as Singapore, Japan, and the United States of America. Dr. Stanley Liu has several years of experience in guiding postgraduate students in forming their research design, selecting their methodology, and data analysis. Our peer tutor coordinators are Kayun Yap is the peer tutor coordinator for statistics and mathematics. Jesslyn is the peer tutor coordinator for accounting and financial management, and I'm the peer tutor coordinator for English. This session will be moderated by Dr. Nimrod, and similar to the first session, will last for each 20 minutes and will be followed by a 25-minute Q&A session. Mr. Michael.
Thank you very much. So as you're keying in this information, I'm just going to give you a little bit about a background about where this is coming from, and also fill you in a bit in what you're about to see. I think this will be quite interesting because Stanley and I, in terms of what we do, we're quite yin and yang in several regards. He's a math genius. I'm the polar opposite of whatever a math genius is. That's why I'm an English teacher, because I guess language teacher is the opposite of a math teacher. That's whenever I have nightmares about being back in school, it's always of being in math class or maybe science class. But Stanley's very good at that. So okay. I'm going to move on from this slide, if that's all right. If anyone needs a... No? Okay. So we're talking about that thin line in providing generic and specialist support to students. Now, when I think about this topic, it gives me a bit of a professional existential crisis in certain ways because, when I first joined JCU 8 years ago, nobody in the institution was quite sure where I belonged. So initially, I was reporting to the head of the marketing department because it was his brainchild to come up with a learning support for our students. And then I shifted over to reporting to the head of student services. And then she didn't quite know how to evaluate what I was doing. So then I shifted over to reporting to the head of the English language preparatory program. And now I'm reporting to the campus dean. So in my work history, the way that I've shifted around from department to department, you can kind of see that it's not just my existential crisis. It's sort of a institutional existential crisis. But as we touched upon in the earlier session, that's actually not always such a disadvantage. You have a lot more flexibility to adapt and move and pivot. You've got a bit of agility. You've got a bit of room to maneuver, and I think I've enjoyed that. So in terms of what kind of support we offer, quick question. I don't know if any of you know this. How many languages are spoken by the students of James Cook University, Singapore? Just give me a number. Throw a number out there, and I'll tell you if you're close or not. No, you guys are coming up short. That's much closer. We're in the 50s. Last I heard, with some 50-some languages are spoken by students on this campus. That kind of knocked me over the first time I heard that. What an incredibly diverse place. Of course, along with that comes, the harsh reality that if you speak a bunch of languages, English, the lingua franca of the world and of education, might not be quite up to the standard that your professors are hoping that it is. So, I've got quite a big job. We've got a lot of students coming over from China and from Vietnam and from various other ASEAN countries. They all need language support of various sorts. So, for a good chunk of them, especially moving on to the business program, English is a secondary language for them. It's not something that they're quite ready to operate in a professional capacity in. So they need a lot of training. They need a lot of language support for writing, especially because that's where, you know, deficits in language ability are most glaringly apparent. Presentations are not something a lot of them have experience with unless they're coming from international schools. Students just didn't give a lot of presentations in their high schools back in China, back in Vietnam. You know, even general English, especially for, I don't want to single out the Chinese students here, but for students from Vietnam or Korea, Singapore is an English immersion experience. For students from China, it is not an English immersion experience, as I'm sure some of you may have experienced, because the level of Mandarin proficiency here is quite high among the general student body. So you've got that sort of, you know, diverging experience in your student body. Some of our students are incredibly motivated and they really, really want to do well. And then others are on the opposite end of that spectrum. So from what I do and the students that I work with, oftentimes a lot of it comes from teacher referrals. The teachers will send the students to me and say, hey, go see Mike for some extra help on this topic or this topic or this topic. Students who are at risk of leaving, they get sent to me as well. These are students who maybe have failed a test. They have failed one of the ELPP levels and they've got to, you know, redo it. And we want to keep them in the university, so we're devoting extra resources to them. Sometimes it takes the form of one-to-one consultations. Other times it's workshops. And, you know, sometimes I'm looking at real small things, you know, grammar points that pop up in student reports. Other times I'm looking at much more macro level problems, such as, you know, students just don't know what they need to do to be successful. And so I'm a specialist. I got a degree in teaching English as a second language, secondary language. Yet at the same time, I feel that what I need, you know, by default, to be a generalist, because with each student, there's going to be a different issue. With each student, there's going to be a different, you know, root problem that we need to focus on. And so one of my challenges, and one of the things that I want to bring to you today and help me talk through is, what am I exactly? Getting back to that existential crisis that we're talking about earlier. You know, what am I doing here? How can I best provide the support that my students need? And so the concept of the learning support program here is give people a bowl of rice and they'll eat for a day, teach them how to grow rice and they'll eat for a lifetime. And once they realize what growing rice involves, they realize how much work they've signed up for and they get cold feet and kind of want to pull away from that. But, you know, we just do what we can. So that kind of brings me to the big question here. Am I a generalist? Am I a specialist? What do my students need me to be? What does my university need me to be? And what do I need me to be? And I think the answer to all three of those questions, there's not one answer that satisfies all three questions. And what I actually do exists somewhere in the tension between, you know, the push and pull of all three of those answers. So quick show of hands, how many of you in the audience are language specialists at your own university? Okay. Yeah, you guys put your hands down. I know who you are. I'm talking about other universities. Right, so I really hope to get some feedback from you about how you view these existential questions. Up next, I'd like to call Stanley up because he is, like I said, the polar opposite of me. And he's got a very, very different story. Stanley?
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, so I'm the learning advisor for the mathematics and statistics in this university. And basically, I'm here for two needs of the student. Okay, so first one, I'm to enable the student to master the mathematics and statistics skill required for their degree program. So that's the first one. Okay, and for the second one is giving them the consultation on the research method and the analysis part of their research. Okay, so I'm going to talk about why there's such a needs happens. Okay, first one is about the research. Okay, when coming to research, it's considered you need a higher level of understanding of the certain topics. And sometimes, even though you can excel in a subject, it doesn't mean that you can fully apply the knowledge on the research. Why? Is because when it comes to research, especially on the quantitative data analysis part, it needs some considered flexibility. There's no such ideal situations whereby for a problem there's only one solution to a problem. Sometimes there might be multiple solutions and the student might not be aware that there might be, okay, for example, for problem A, maybe they have 10 solutions. The student might be aware on 1 to 2 solutions or didn't aware of any of the solutions. Okay, so for such a situation, because when you are doing research, they have to cover many things. So the student might feel confused of their research already. So when such a thing happens, it's important to there's such a person to guide them through to think through how they can approach to the problem, eventually come up to a suitable solution for the problem. Okay, so that's for the part for the consultation for the research needs. Okay, for the second part is on the mathematics and statistics skill for the coursework program in this university. Okay, so there's such a need because when coming to a certain module, there are some prerequisites. So whereby in order for you to follow through the module smoothly, you are required to have certain fundamental knowledge. Whereby in case if you don't have that knowledge, you might be struggling or not really understanding what the lecturer is talking about. So eventually the student will feel like a bit struggling when listening to the lecture or doing the tutorial questions. In addition to that, other than those fundamental knowledge, students sometimes they are required to picking up some new knowledge as well, because as the evolve of the technologies, there are more and more data analysis technique and also software available. So it's important to prepare through to have equipped with such a skill so that increase their employability later on when they graduate from this university. Okay, so there's such two needs. So how do I normally fulfill the needs is, okay, so it's considered generally through workshops or the consultations. Okay, workshops is done normally for a group of students. It's normally like to deliver the knowledge for the certain topics, because there are many students who needs this kind of the knowledge. So I will just make it as a workshop, so the student come and then I will deliver the knowledge to them. While the consultation is more on the specific part, is more on the research, because as I said previously, when you come to research, each of the research has their particular kind of the problem and requires particular kind of the solutions. So if I use a workshop to tackle the research problem for each of the students, it might not be as efficient as do it individually, because I have to listen to each of the problem they have, then to come up with the suitable solutions. And the students who coming to me are either from the coursework program or the research module. For the coursework program, most of them who comes to me most of the time is on the foundations or the beginnings part of the mathematics and the statistics module, because this is where there are some gaps between some students, whereby some students who coming in already is considered expert of the knowledge already, so there's not really a problem for them to follow through the module throughout the time. While on the other hand, if there are some students who already, not so strong on the certain topic, or they need some brush up on the certain topics, they might come to me to equip the knowledge. While on the research program is as I said, they are doing the research, and then most of them is the quantitative analysis part of the research. Okay, so that's more or less I would like to present for my part. Then followed by the questions arise by Mike. I will see myself as a specialist because most of the time the problem I tackle is quite specific. Okay, so I will pass to the next speaker.
Hi, I'm Jaslyn Felicia from IMAS Peer Tutors. I'm from the Accounting and Finance Peer Tutoring program. So we give, like as what the name said, Accounting and Finance. We are more to the specialist support, which is Accounting and Finance subjects. Based on my experience, students who come for our help, most of them come, they ask these three common subjects: accounting, decision making, principle and system, and financial management. And these three subjects are actually the three basic, like level 1 core subjects of accounting and finance in JCU. Most of the time, students come without having like clear idea what they do and don't understand. So instead of going directly to the questions, we tackle on their basic understanding. So firstly, we ask them to show us their lecture slide. And then after giving us the questions, we ask them about some of basic questions about their knowledge on the subject itself to test their understanding. And then we help them to solve questions by working on examples and lecture slides. We don't always expect students coming to us like accounting or finance question, but we also give generally support. We know that some students might feel shy or unable to approach the lecturer to ask questions. So we are here to give them support. We raise awareness about common problems that they face in the university and how to address them. And the most important part is, as peer tutor, we don't teach them, like we don't give answers directly to them, but instead we ask them, we let them know what can they do, and they study from their lecture slide first. And I want to highlight that we don't teach them like anything detailed. We just guide them and discuss. So I want to make sure that they own their learning progress, not us. Thank you.
I'm actually the English peer tutor coordinator at JCU. So I like to believe that at IMAS we provide both general and specific support to students, especially in the English field. So our specialist support basically consists of helping students enhance their academic writing. So what this consists of, basically helping students improve their sentence structure, grammar, and vocabulary. So how we assess students is we ask them to bring in a sample of their writing, and we go through it carefully and assess the kind of style they have, and assess these three factors in their writing. So we don't actually correct the grammar like word by word, but we provide them with suggestions on how they could improve their writing further and improve their academic style of writing. We also provide general support in the form of we help mostly ELPP students who have difficulty in conversing in English. So we bring them in, we ask them to converse with us with whatever little knowledge that they have. So we listen to their speaking skills, and we listen to them, their speaking skills, and we provide feedback on how they could improve their speaking problems. So what we do is we provide daily life situations where they place themselves, like going to the supermarket or buying groceries, things like that, where they can actually apply themselves and improve their speaking skills. So what this actually does is when the students come to us, they observe other students who are willing to learn. So to this, they learn good study habits as well. So I've heard my time's up, so thank you.
Okay, hi. So as Kajol mentioned earlier, I'm actually the peer tutor coordinator for mathematics and statistics. So of course, generally some of the specialist support that we offer is mathematics and statistics. But mainly we cater to students from the Bachelor of Psychological Science program. So I think about 95% of the students we see are actually from psychological science. So what we do generally is to guide students to understand how to conduct the statistical analysis and also how to interpret. So why is our peer tutoring program for statistics so important? It's really because statistics permeates almost all aspects of psychology. And the more important part is also because these are core modules in our Bachelor of Psychological Science program. If they don't pass, they can't graduate. And more importantly is that research is really the foundation for, statistics is really the foundation for conducting research during their honours years. Without all these statistical analysis, they're not going to finish writing their thesis. But apart from the specialist support that we provide, we somehow also provide a bit of generalist support while giving that specialist support. And one of the things that I frequently observe when helping out students is actually that, you know, some of the support that we have to provide is really overcoming the fear or anxiety about statistics. And this is actually quite a common phenomenon over here, or probably in psychology programs all over the world. And it's actually a construct that is being measured, that can be measured using a assessment tool. So the thing is that one of the common perceptions that psychology students tend to have is that statistics is a very difficult module or difficult thing to master. And there's this assumption also that bad in mathematics equals bad in statistics. But I'm bad in maths, but I'm not really bad in stats, actually. Yeah, so one of the things that we do is really to clarify all these kinds of misunderstandings to overcome these kind of fears. And another thing is really also enabling self-confidence in statistics. So I realized that some of the students who actually come into the peer tutoring program for help, you know, they actually know their stuff pretty well, but, you know, they're confused or they might not have the confidence that, you know, their answer is actually correct. So this is something that I also try to instill while I'm, you know, teaching some stuff to them. And of course, also learning from mistakes and trying to master statistics. As I mentioned, you know, some of them actually know their stuff. They might have conducted some stats wrongly, but at the end of the day, when you clarify with them, they actually do know what they're doing. And, you know, this kind of emotional support is very important because, you know, it really helps them to be confident in doing it so that they can confidently carry out the exams. Okay, so now I'm done and we'll move on to the Q&A now.
Now, I have a few questions on Slido, but if you have questions that you would like to ask verbally, maybe we can begin with those questions first. Could you hear me? Yes. Bruce from the University of Reading in Malaysia.
More of an additional comment rather than a question, really, on the original question of the generalist versus specialist. I suppose my view is that a study advisor needs to actually be both, by definition. So I think there's not many people out there who would want to be a pure generalist of whatever. There are perhaps quite a few academics who would like to be very much a specialist, and traditionally that's what a lot of academics have been. But it seems to me, in a reflection of the way that the world's going, that being a specialist is a niche thing these days, and being a generalist to some extent is the way of the world. And we're talking about collaboration between different disciplines at universities, for example, is very much economically and all sorts of other reasons for it as being a good thing. So I think there's been a few good examples provided of, like, the emotional support, for example, if you are a specialist in stats and you can also provide emotional support for these students, that is a fantastic study advisor. So in a way, you've answered your own question, if you see what I mean.
Thank you for that comment from Bruce. Anyone else with or who would like to say something? We have Charles from the University of Newcastle.
Yeah, I'm just adding some comments here. I think the biggest challenge for both teaching and learning, and same for academic, I guess, in trying to help the students is, well, I guess straddling the generalist versus specialist is we need to, on both sides, understand the material very well. So we assume we are an expert. Now the biggest challenge in the world, same for me, is I think I'm a specialist, I know the stuff, is to be able to explain it in a way that the student understands. So some are very high level would understand it quickly, but most are, at some level. And it's easy to say things in my language, which is cryptic, within, let's say, a phone. I know his business, but assuming he's environmental, then we can talk for hours, right? But then to explain it in a way that the student understands, I think is the challenge here for all of us. And so I think we need to know, I don't know, read more or have training in that. Yeah, that is the biggest the art in the science, because in university, I forgot anyways, it's a long time ago. We did a lot of, I'm not in mathematics, but there was an equation on physics and all that. So it's so difficult to understand, which is generally the case. But we had one professor who just had this big equation, and in 5 minutes, after about 8-7 years struggling with that, I could understand immediately what it was. So that's really, how do we get to that level to explain that equation that some joker, somebody could understand it? I think that's our challenge here. So how do we cross that gap?
That's a good comment. Do we have, let's have Mike.
I think one thing I'm taking away from all this, based on the audience feedback, is I think there's a pretty good professional development program developing in my head right now. Things that kind of a wish list of skills I'd like to get a bit more training on. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Horgan. So I think the question is, what makes you motivated in doing what you're doing at JCU?
Love of your university, right?
Can we hear from Chayun?
Okay, I guess one thing that really motivates me is that a lot of students, because of their fear for statistics, they're afraid of doing it, but there is a lot of importance in really understanding statistics, especially in psychology. And I think in the long run, that if they don't have a good foundation in it, it might affect long-term outcomes. Yeah, which is why I think that it's really, really important to, help them gain a good foundation in statistics. And it's just this common misperception that it isn't fun or that it's very difficult. But when you understand it, it's really something that, it's quite enjoyable and it's very applicable in many areas, not just psychology, in a lot of other things as well. Yeah.
I'd like to add on to it. When I joined JCU initially, I noticed that a lot of students would not converse in English. They would stick to their native languages. So I was very curious to see why that was so. So when I joined the peer tutoring program, I'd seen a lot of people who have a keen interest to learn, but they don't have they're too scared to go to teachers and ask for help. So when they come to EMAS, they are actually keen to learn more and more. And this is something I've done during high school, so it's sort of a stepping stone doing it here in university.
In other words, the fulfilling factor, they're fulfilled to actually help other students.
And the reason why I volunteered to join IMAS in the first place is that before I joined IMAS, I have lots of friends and we discuss lots of things about accounting and finance. So I feel that if I can discuss with more people or more peers in IMAS, so why not I grab this opportunity to join IMAS. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a follow-up question? When you guys are doing the peer tutoring and basically teaching other students about the topics that you're studying, do you feel that deepened your understanding? Did you come away with a greater understanding of stats or English from that?
With English, there's not really much. So what I do is I don't necessarily have to be from that same subject to help people with writing. So suppose I haven't really done a subject, I can still help the student improve their writing in that subject course. So in a way, I'm learning something new from the student as well. So it's not just me sharing my writing writing skills, but I'm also gaining some knowledge from the student as well.
And I think it's not really just about being able to teach better, but when I teach people, I realize that when I explain, oh, there's actually something that I don't really understand fully, and it makes me go back and then revise it and then really understand it properly to help them, to help them understand better. And I think that's one of the best things for myself as well when I do peer tutoring, is that I really understand the material a lot better. Yeah.
That's good to know, because peer tutoring is also a very good practice, right? It's a very good practice to develop your own skills and to also understand you as a person, as someone who helps others. Now, there are very interesting questions on Slido.
Sorry, I want to actually go back to what you were talking about the fear. I don't have a comment about this, but I do have a question. The fear of statistics. In my experience working with students of, highly motivated students and very students with nearly no motivation, I see similar fears. And it's some sort of, in my own view, it seems more related to just everything school related is some kind of test. And my impression is that especially if they come from cultures where one test can determine the path of your whole life, like in Singapore, there's the PSLE, and that sort of sets your path from a very young age. Or, in China, the Gaokao, doing well in that will put you on the road to success, and crashing and burning at that will put you on a road to perdition or something. Do you notice that more generally among students from these sort of test-heavy cultures, or do you think it's specific to statistics? And I'd like to put that to the audience as well, the teachers and the learning advisors from other schools as well.
I guess from what I've observed is typically the result of probably a very test-heavy culture. And one of the things in statistics is also that there are a lot of tests. Yeah. And I realized that, students, like I said earlier, they actually know what they're doing, but when they go in there and then they get a bit anxious, I suppose, they look at the question and then they don't know what on earth is asking. Yeah, so I guess generally the test culture really does play a part in statistics anxiety, but also perhaps the population of students that we generally see who are psychology students, typically not many of them actually like mathematics, and they generalize this dislike for mathematics to a dislike for statistics or a fear of that, so that's something that I really try to help them overcome.
Thank you. And I think there's a very interesting question here, which I think Stanley might have some thoughts. The question says, students with math cues or math questions readily go to see learning advisors for help. Students, and I think Mike has some thoughts on this, with academic English weaknesses are reluctant to go. What's the reason for this gap?
Okay, so you mean that the student for the mathematics questions,
they readily go to you to ask questions. Is that your experience?
Yeah, can say like that because most of the time the student who coming to me, they somehow they are the person they have the feel like they already been trying for the questions for quite long already, and they have been struggling to find the solutions. So they come to me with a particular problems, and then the approach to me basically is to find out the solution and to find out what they are lacking in order to achieve this. Like for example, they are asking me about a concept of, let's say, concept C, which typically might require the understanding of the concept A and concept B in order for him or her to know about the concept C. So most of the time, the student who struggle is because they are lacking of the concept A and the concept B but he's trying to understand the concept C. So, which is why it's important for a learning advisor to know what is the real problem the student is having, which in this case, it might be that he's lacking of the knowledge of A and B before answer C. So we would, in this case, try to explain to the student what is A and B. So at this moment, if the student know about A and B, the C is considered quite easy for the student to understand, which is why most of the time, I think most of the audience over here has taken the mathematics statistics module before, and you find that, okay, why there's such a situation you couldn't really understand the C even though you study for like about 1 week to 2 weeks. And you see, after you see some professor in mathematics, that it will become very easy for you because most of the time you are lacking of some of the foundation knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we have a comment from the audience.
Hello, my name is Vijay. I'm coming from Temasek Polytechnic. Can you hear me? I thought I just wanted to comment about what the question that's going on here, and I thought I would like to phrase it within the context of what you showed. If a man is hungry, give him food. Otherwise, train him to grow rice and then grow him. I think there's a subtle line between those two layers. When a man is hungry and you teach him to plant rice, he's going to starve and die by the time he learns the skill. So you got to feed him first and then teach him the skills. I think there's a subtle line between that. And why do I say that is because in Polytechnic, when we tried doing very generic skill sets to engage students, be it elevate the fear for coding, not mathematics but coding, or in fact teaching them basic skills of planning things, we found that it didn't take it up. They were hungry, but they didn't find this long-term process useful. So what we tried doing was that we embedded ideas about this within subjects. So we brought supports within the subject itself, and we gave them, the hungry person, something. But before they were okay with their hunger, we left them with other nuggets to pick up on. So we embedded a lot more things within the thing itself, and that's what we are trying to do in the Polytechnic itself. And that's our experience in a sense.
Thank you, sir. That's very enlightening. Very enlightening comment. That's a very enlightening nugget of wisdom. But I think Mike also may have something to add about, based on his experience, whether students with academic English weaknesses are reluctant to go. Is this the case?
Starving to death. I really that's a good comment. My father-in-law is Japanese, and when he retired, he had to find a cheap place for him and his wife to live, and so he was looking all through rural northern Japan, and every time he'd come across a nice house, he'd realize, now this is like a rice farming area, and it's very difficult, because we'd be harvesting rice for the rest of his retired years. He didn't want that because he knew how much work is involved in planting the rice and maintaining it and harvesting it, and that cycle is really it takes a toll on you. So my own impression of this question is that students have a sense of how big of a mountain language is. I think statistics, in my own experience as a pretty mediocre student, you could kind of muddle your way through it, and if it's not such an integral part of your day-to-day life, even though it is an important part of the subject, you can kind of, you know, fake your way through it, get someone to help you with. But language it's a much bigger obstacle, and I think students have a sense of exactly how much work is involved in it. And if they're really motivated, they're willing to put in the work and get it done. But otherwise, it's just a scary thing to confront. So they kind of close their eyes and just move forward. So, thank you for the input.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mike. Any follow-up question from the audience? No? Okay, I think how many more minutes do we have? Another interesting question is a question about balance. The question says, how do you balance the needs of students, something like pastoral care, with the needs of the university, which is something about passing rates? Is this something, Stanley and Mike, that
what's best for the students is not always what's best for the university, and vice versa? It's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. What about Stanley? I mean, the understanding here is that the university has to meet threshold requirements, you know, passing rate, retention, whether students are really performing well academically. But at the same time, you know, based on the teacher's experience, students may just, at the very start, need some pastoral care.
Somewhat agree with Mike.
Okay. Any feedback from the audience? Yeah, Ms. Gandhi here.
Just to share our experience, now I've got roughly foundation students, the young lot, 17, 18 years old. Now I've noticed a lot from China especially, when we encourage them, because as I mentioned earlier, we try to gauge the students' English, statistics expertise in the beginning itself. When they come in week 1 itself, we administer a Pella and a Penna. So what happens after the results are established, when we tell the students, hey, look, you need to go for these classes, especially the students from China, they come and tell me, no, Mrs. Gandhi, I can't go, it's paise for me. If my friends see me going for classes, they know I'm not good enough. So that is one problem I think many of us do face. But of course, we try to tell them it's for your good, don't worry about your friends because it's affecting you, you know, your performance. The other thing, I mean, you mentioned about the pass rates. How do we, you know, compromise this too? So what we have now, of course, we think of ways and means of, you know, establishing better pass rates and retention rates. So just to give you an example, like last semester, like one of the classes, we had about 82 students for lecture tutorial. So this year, with the discussion with the campus dean and all, we are starting like our new semester in SP53, we are starting a lectorial system, which only caters to 30 students at one go. So we, as a university too, we try to find ways and means how to establish better pass rates and retention rates. Because with a smaller cohort, definitely it's going to be easier for the lecturers, you know, to keep abreast of the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gandhi, the life-saving face. Willing has a comment.
I just thought that perhaps our colleagues from the other institutions here might like to know, because you've heard us mention Pella and Penna, and you may not be aware of what it means. Pella is Post-Enrollment Language Assessment. It's the assessment that's given to some students in some of the subjects in the when they first enter JCU. It's to have a sense of where their English is parked and whether they need additional support. It's the same with Penna. Penna is Post-Enrollment Numeracy Assessment. So it's also to find out the mathematical skills, where they're parked and whether they need additional support in that area. So this is just to let you know about that, because you hear it being bandied, right? And I'm aware that sometimes you come across acronyms that just kill you, isn't it? I mean, I know when I first went to UK and I saw these acronyms here, there, everywhere, I was like, what is that? And then I found out when I asked people. So this is just how I thought would be good, useful.
Thank you. Thank you. do you want to add something?
Yeah, when it comes to what students want and what students need, this kind of goes back to the general and specialist thing again. One of the things I try to do is figure out what the students expect to get out of university, or what they expect to experience in university. And I know that in some, so Japan, Korea, China, for example, getting into university is really, really difficult, but getting out of university is incredibly easy. Whereas it's especially in the case of ELPP, it's quite easy to get into ELPP, but then to successfully complete JCU, it's quite difficult. So if they're coming in here with this expectation that they, now that they're in, it's going to be an easy road through, they're in for a rude awakening at some point. And I'm still figuring out ways to best get them to understand this particular point, and that's a big challenge. But that's issues of motivation, these cultural issues. It's not necessarily what I've trained to do, and I got to figure out better ways of doing that. So I'm assuming that the University of Newcastle, University of Reading, you guys also have a lot of students from China. Yeah, you find similar issues among your student body there?
Devi, do you have something to say? So Devi's from the University of Newcastle, and Bruce from the University of Reading.
Yeah, we do have a lot of students from China, and we have similar issues. Like you said, it's very easy to get in, pass the placement test. They come in, and then after 2 semesters, and we don't have our own English programs. We run it with our partner universities like BSB and BCA. So we don't even have control of what they go through. So it's when it comes to teaching support, learning support, we pick up from basically the entire the cohort, whatever issues that they have, we reteach, we relearn. So in that sense, it's a bit different from JCU, because they go through and you have control of what they do. But over here, we don't have an English department, so it's a bit different. Yeah.
Thank you.
We also like to hear from Bruce.
Okay. Yeah, sorry for confusing you by changing seats. It's still the same person. Yeah, in our UK campus, Reading, we have an enormous number of Chinese students, as every British university does. And the vast majority of them arrive with their IELTS or whatever score just good enough. Not plenty good enough, but just good enough. So I think there's in addition to the general stigma aspect of I don't want to go and get English support because then all my friends will talk about me behind my back, which is definitely a big factor. I think there's a general belief that they've got the English level, so why do you need any more English? Which, as you say, comes to a rude awakening for a lot of them. But for a lot of them, there's also a sense of denial. And again, when I say them, I'm not singling out the Chinese necessarily, it's just the largest volume of students. Perhaps the biggest thing is that it's the peer pressure thing, really, that makes them hesitate. But in terms of the Malaysia campus, I don't think we've got any Chinese students at all, have we? But that's another story. But what we do have is lots of students from Malaysia. And there's a difference there because, of course, Malaysians have a lot better English in general than Chinese students. But you do get some whose English isn't that great. And I think it's particularly difficult for some of them to step out and go forward to get support, or whatever you call it, because there's a higher chance of them sort of feeling embarrassed among their friends whose English is better.
Thank you, Bruce, and we are concerned of time. But there's actually one very important question for Stanley. I think whoever asked this question, maybe you could talk to Stanley later during lunch. I mean, the question is about software package and student performance in data analysis. I think that's, you are in the right position to answer that question over lunch. So thank you so much, and let's give a round of applause to our speakers.
Okay, so let's proceed to the final session for the day. So the topic for this session is the role of educational technology in learning support. So our speakers for this session will be Miss Esther Fink, a learning technology specialist here at JCUS, and Miss Devi Kalei, the teaching and learning advisor at the University of Newcastle, Singapore. So for Miss Devi, she has over 10 years of experience teaching language and communication subjects in various universities in Singapore, and is also proficient in various interactive student-centered pedagogies of education. So for Miss Esther, as the learning technology specialist, she supports the strategic development and implementation of educational technologies to promote e-learning and blended learning across the campus. So this session will be moderated by Ms. Hui Ling and Dr. Stanley. And again, all the speakers will have 20 minutes to speak, which will be followed by a 25 minutes Q&A. So Ms. Devi, please.
Hi everyone. Today both Esther and I, we're going to present on the theme of the role of educational technology at both our universities, University of Newcastle and James Cook University. So let me start by giving you a definition of what educational technology is. Educational technology refers to all forms of technology that is used in an educational setting for many reasons. It could be to improve learners' experience, increase student interactivity, formulate more open feedback, and whole lot of other reasons. Today's learners are very different to those that the educational system was originally designed for. Technology is altering classrooms to fit evolving needs of the contemporary student. Higher education institutions like ourselves are replacing traditional resources with educational technologies in an attempt to keep up with the digital learning population. As a teaching and learning advisor, I run many academic workshops and transition to tertiary education workshops for students. To get them involved and take ownership of their learning, I think providing an interactive teaching and learning environment is very important. If they're not interested and if they are not engaged, then they're not receiving the necessary information. Information is just not getting in. So let's look at why higher education, why is there a need for education technology in our institutes? I think the very most important aspect is that education technology encourages collaboration. So instead of a one-way kind of teaching, lecturer teaches, student receives, everyone is able to participate, is able to take part in discussion boards, and even in groups when it's just students, they are able to have discussions, have meetings through Skype. So I think that is very important. A few other aspects of why the need for education technology is it supports different types of learners. Some students are very good, they're very fast, they get concepts, they get aspects very quickly. Some students, they need to come back, they need to relearn, they need to go online, reread lecture materials, redo quizzes. So that's another very good aspect. What I personally like in a classroom is the fun factor that educational technology adds. GBL, game-based learning, is something that a lot of classroom environments use. I'm not sure if you guys have used, I'm so sorry for my voice, I'm losing my voice, excuse me. I'm not sure if you guys have used Kahoot, Padlet, these are very interesting platforms, to get the class going, to get students, come out of their shell, to be an icebreaker. Another thing is the immediacy of feedback. Students can go on Padlet and they can write, what have they learned? What is the objective? What do you think is the objective of this class? You can do a pre-session, you can do a post-session, and students are always connected from start to end. And that is great about educational technology. Now let's look at what has already been done. What have institutes like ourselves, what have we already implemented in our institutes? Blended learning is something that most of us have already implemented, with a lot of emphasis on the flipped classroom, where students get access to the online materials, they read, they come into class so that they are prepared. They're prepared to start a discussion. They're prepared to, move on instead from starting at the beginning. Assessment, evaluation of courses. Peer tutoring is something which is up and coming. JCU has EMAS. In UON, we have what we call PASS, PASS, Peer Assisted Study Scheme. And now a lot of the peer tutoring systems are moving on to online form. In UN, we are in the process of moving on to online tutoring with regards to peer tutoring. So that's another thing that, technology is helping in. Game-based learning and academic support is what we do. I think, again, like I said earlier, with academic support, students come from lectures, they come from tutorials, they need something a bit extra, I guess, to, stimulate their mind. So, giving them little quizzes, getting them hooked onto, they come to you because they need additional help. So I think technology using, little games and little discussion board also helps them. All right, now, of course, with everything, there are going to be factors that promote the use of technology, and there will be factors that inhibit. So factors that promote the use of technology, very easy. This is based on our experience. Both Esther and I discussed about this. When we adapt to something new, like educational technology, why? We have the growing need for lifelong learning opportunities. Okay, there's always competition from different higher education institutes. When a student now chooses an institute, they look at, are there going to be classes, online classes? Is it just going to be one-way traditional learning? No, they want something more. They want to be able to submit via Blackboard. They want to have discussion boards. They want to help academic support after hours. Okay, so that's one of the factors that promotes the use. Of course, there are needs for alternatives for traditional on-campus instruction. Okay, students want access to materials outside class time. They want to be able to revise on their own at home. But there are also, excuse me, despite the popularity of technology in higher education, its integration throughout higher education is not without its hurdles. And this is again based on our experience. So what are the hurdles? High cost of technological application. We're not going to, management is not going to want to adapt to every single platform that is useful out there. Of course, it has to make monetary sense. Another inhibition is the reluctance from staff to adapt to technology. Some staff might feel like, I've tried and tested my way of teaching. I'm going to give a lot of printed notes. My students like to touch notes. What is this online learning? No. I want to teach the way I've been teaching for the last 20 years. Do not tell me to put my notes online, So resistance, okay, it happens. All right, I'm sure it happens everywhere. And if they have gotten over the resistance, there's also this other thing where staff need technical support. A 1-week course or a 3-day course to teach staff how to use technology is not going to be sufficient for staff to adapt to these technologies. I think there needs to be consistent support, consistent support on continuous training for the staff so that, they can get that support. All right, so I don't have much time. So those are the reasons that I've presented, its use, its limits, and now I would like to involve you, audience, in a task using feedback, a presentation software that is used in a lot of learning environments now. I would like to introduce you to Mentimeter. Could you please go to the website menti.com and type in the code given?
David, what's the first question?
How many of you have used Mentimeter?
So the first question is, how many of you have used Mentimeter?
Is that you're asking us to answer? You're you're asking us to put on Mentimeter? Because I only saw one question.
The first question, yeah. I'm just checking the question. The first question, oh, but they can't see.
We can communicate the results, that's fine.
I have a different question too.
Different question?
How can technology help learning?
Okay, then.
So let's start with that one. How can technology help learning? So I understand that's a word cloud question, is that right? So maybe just type in terms, words, whatever you think, whether it can or can't.
Can I just see?
Okay. So Devi is going to share the answers, and I'll just move on with our presentation. Now that we've looked at learning technology from a classroom perspective, teaching perspective, I'd just like to take a very brief look at what's happening in the learning technology space at the moment. Every year, the EduCourse Horizon report sort of gives institutions an idea of what's going to happen and come up in the learning technology space by talking to professionals, individuals, teachers, universities all over the world, and using those results to come up with some trends. And you can see some trends up here. And when we're looking at the 1 year or less space, we see mobile learning, analytics technologies. When we look at the 2 years to 3 year space, we see mixed reality, artificial intelligence. So that's starting to happen, but trends for the future. In some areas here at JCU, we have projects in those spaces, like in aquaculture, for example, where we use virtual reality environments, or in another subject where we use like an aquaculture game on mobile phones to help the students think about the science behind raising fish. But when we're looking at the larger space we work in, we're really looking at the day-to-day basics of how technology impacts on our learning and teaching. For all of us, technology has an increasing presence in our daily lives. We depend on our mobile phones. We use them not only for work, but for private purposes as well, to talk to people, to get information, to get us from A to B. When we're talking about institutional systems here at JCU, we're in the process of transforming or changing over to a new learning management system, or rather the latest version of our current system. And that's quite a challenge, because it's not just a matter of technology, but it's also a matter of how does the technology work for people? How does it work for us in our day-to-day teaching and learning? And sometimes it can help us, but sometimes it can actually make our lives complicated, hard and difficult. That is when it's not working, or when it's not working for us the way it should work. As part of the transition process, we've tried to think about what students should or can be able to expect as part of their learning experience. For a start, that's not really in the fancy, advanced virtual reality space, but it's in the very basic, I can expect to have my learning materials and information about my subject online in preparation for my lectures. I can expect to have learning resources that can help me with my learning. I will submit my assessment online and I can receive feedback online. The communication or essential communication will to some extent or to a large extent happen in the online spaces as well. I'm not talking about conversations in the classroom or communication. To some extent we do it, yes, where we have student projects, collaborative projects, or communication with the outside. But a lot of that is really happening face-to-face in the classroom. So it's more a matter of thinking about how the technology that we do have available to us can support the teaching and learning and teaching in the classroom. An important element of that is also the growing understanding or developing that understanding of how is technology relevant for me in my future professional life? How am I expected to communicate as a professional in the various spaces or the various digital media that we use as professionals in our daily life? And that might be thinking about putting together a PowerPoint presentation. That might be thinking about how to professionally write an email or how to write an essay, article, whatever it might be, using the technology that's available to us. As an institution, there's another layer to the online space for us that is really important when it comes to accreditation, quality assurance, making sure that we are achieving what we are aiming to achieve. And to some extent, technology can really help us there by removing a layer of paperwork that we might have to do otherwise. For example, with the online assessment submission, as an institution, we have a really good track record of what a student submitted, when they submitted, how it was marked, what feedback they were given. And we're actually working at the moment on the data from online rubrics, assessment rubrics, to feedback to students how they are progressing towards achieving their learning goals. That's still early stages, but it's an important measure for us as an institution, and it's an important measure for the students to see how they are progressing and what they might or might not do to achieve that. And as part of that, we actually have this data available to really provide students with more targeted support, with more personalized support in their various endeavors. You've met our MS peer tutors, and for us they are partners in that process. And our MS peer tutors also help their fellow students with digital learning support. They are a first point of contact or a first reference when it comes to digital learning questions like students who might not have used a learning management system before. How do I submit an assessment? How do I retrieve my feedback? Where do I find my marks? We also run workshops around safe assign plagiarism reports, for example. How can I read my safe assign report and think about how I might improve my essay or my text that I'm writing? And our students are really an important partner in the whole process. With that, I think we'd really like to move to the conversation part or to the discussion part and start the conversation with you around any questions that you might like to ask, either in person or via Slido, or any projects that you would like to share with the audience, with us, that might be of interest in that context.
Okay, thank you, Esther and Miss Debbie, for the interesting presentations. Now we can see there are a couple of the questions posted on the Slido. Okay, maybe you can start with these questions. Okay, there's one asks, is there a tangible benefit for students to use the technology? Okay, anyone want to answer these questions?
Tangible benefits in terms of measurable effect? Not entirely sure. I think in the end, technology is a tool, and it can only be as good as the integration or the purpose we use it for. By having a crane, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will have a high-rise building as a result. And it's a bit similar with technology. So a large part of it is, for me, what's the purpose? Does it fit the purpose? Does it suit or meet your needs? And when it comes to an institutional level of technology, how do we implement technology in a way that doesn't hinder rather than promote what we try to do? Does that answer the question? Anything you'd like to add, Debbie?
No, it's okay.
Does anyone out there have any question which you haven't put into Slido? We've got 3 questions there. We've answered one, but maybe the others here who are not using Slido and would like to add to the discourse, either with a question or with your comment on how digital technology has been used.
6 questions on Slido now.
6 questions on Slido? Ah, okay. Sorry, thank you. Okay, there's one that I think comes to. There are two new questions there. One is about students. The other one is about technology itself. So I'm going to look at the one that is about technology. It says there, technology dates quickly. Universities may not continue to invest. Will we need to depend on free platforms in future?
Are you okay? Okay. Yes and no. Yes, technology dates quickly. To be honest, I don't see it going away quickly because, as I said, it's a tool. It's something that fits a purpose, and for us as an institution, it's also means to an end because, as you all know, data is a commodity these days, and having accurate data on how our students are progressing towards achieving their learning outcomes is really important. So don't necessarily see it going away. Will we develop our own? It would be nice, but I've been in this place before, working with a research group around developing analytics tool. And I can tell you there's a lot of hard work and testing and failure in that, and you need a big budget to do it, so it's not necessarily cheaper to develop your own. And I guess as institutions, we need to think about very carefully how we're going to spend our budget and which tools might fit the purpose best.
I think with the free platforms that they were talking about, I think it's always good to, you know, for the teaching staff, the learning support, or the academics to do research, and you know, there's always going to be an update of different platforms. You know, like 5 years ago it was Kahoot, it was a big thing, and now, you know, Kahoot is still used, but it's not as popular as it's been taken over by so many other platforms, and like Powtoons, you know, there are always going to be programs that are going to be released. Powtoons was the go-to presentation, you know, free platform, and now we have Mentimeter. So I think it's our job to constantly upgrade ourselves, to know what's new in the market, because students are going to find out. I mean, they're going to talk to their peers from other universities, and so forget about technology becoming outdated. It will not, I think. It always will be relevant. It's just how much you update yourself, and whether you're on to the next thing that is big in the market in the educational industry. That's what I think.
To some extent, I think it's also about skills, or basic skills, more than the bells and whistles, probably. In the end, whether you're asking a question through Slido or Mentimeter, or whether you're asking it in person in the classroom, it's still interaction with your audience. And for some purposes, it might be quite helpful, quite useful to have technology that actually captures what's going on, because you might want to use it for research purposes, because you might want to visualize it in different ways, and it can make your life easier. But I think it takes me back to the question is, what's the purpose, and how can you achieve what you're planning to achieve? And that should drive the selection of any tools.
That's it.
Okay. I just had a simple comment to what Esther and Devi have shared about that tools, the technology is unlikely to be outdated. It's a matter of actually keeping yourself updated with new versions that keep coming up. That actually, when you think about it, technology is but a tool. It's not the be-all and end-all of what we do in education and what we do with the students, right? I think it's perhaps to help the students mediate learning that they can use, something that they can use to mediate, to achieve their learning outcomes. And this brings me, therefore, to the next question that's in Slido. It's very interesting because it comes back to students. We're talking about technology as tools to help students mediate learning. And the question here is, how do we teach students better tech habits? Their tech habits are very poor. When phones come out, class is derailed. And that's an interesting question because like I said before, I come from junior college context. And I stopped teaching for a while. When I went back into teaching, all right, phones weren't allowed. There were already mobile phones, but they weren't allowed in the classroom. And then I insisted. I told my HOD, I need the phone. I'm doing research education. How do I teach the students to go online and search using search engines if I don't have the technology in class to use. Because I said, we don't have enough computers in the lab. I need the students to use their smartphones so that I can do it with them. So I had the HOD actually agree to let me, with my one class, use the phone. And then everybody else found out. And then before you know it, it was allowed for research education in the whole school. And the next thing you knew, and the year I left schools and came and joined JCU, phones are allowed in classrooms. They're allowed in classrooms. During lectures, during tutorials. It came to a stage where, like, if the student is not going to listen, it's the student's problem. The student will fail. Let the student fail. But I think in schools you can do that because you can hit them properly. But I think in higher education institutions, it's a bit more difficult to say let the students fail, because where we are, we have audit indicators that we need to meet, like retention rates and pass rates and all that. So this is really a very interesting question, and I'm wondering if our panelists can help us with that.
Yeah, actually, I think I'd like to put that question back to the teaching staff, because you could probably say more to that than I can. My personal opinion is, in the end, it's about classroom management and whether and how you're going to address it, and whether digital tools are part of it or not. It is just a different element and not necessarily what drives or fails in the end. It's just a different way of doing it.
Yeah. I think I also need to know what exactly tech habits, what exactly is it referring to? I mean, do they get distracted and then they don't put their phones away for the rest of the class? Or, yes, okay. Then again, like what Esther said, I think it's classroom management. There has to be some strict rules, okay, put your phone away and whatever not. Yeah, but I think academic staff, maybe they can share, some of the academic staff here, how you deal with this issue.
Hi, good afternoon now, into lunchtime. Thank you. I think this topic, on technology is always going to be an issue in the class. And you're right, I think we have to strike a balance in that sense. So personally for me, I'm quite strict about the use of mobile devices, including computers for that matter. I put out my slides, and I would prefer students to actually maybe print them out, because I teach economics and we have graphs and we have quantitative things that need to be done. And to me, that is a way of engaging the student and getting them to participate rather than putting everything up on the PowerPoint slides. But then again, yes, there are times during the lectures when I do need them to access materials outside, like when you throw them a question and you want them to do some research. So obviously, then they have to use their mobile devices. And after which then, yes, they have to be reminded quite a few times to then, now put it away, we don't need it now, and we might need it later, kind of thing. It takes a bit of time and a bit of effort to do that, but I guess that's the way we have to. We can't totally ban it, but we have to manage it. In that respect.
It just becomes part of...
Yeah, and after a while, the students know me and they know my style, and they know when I say we don't need it for now, means they know, put it away. And when it's time to use it, we'll bring it out, Yeah, so I think it's just a matter of managing that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I teach in the English department, and similar to Jet, I think it takes maybe about 2 weeks for students to understand the expectations of use in the class. I find that because we're dealing with adults, I think saying 100% ban does not necessarily work. There should be some freedom. But it's easy to teach the students if they have something important to do outside, they can take their phone outside, take a call from family or even girlfriend. And I think that there is this challenge, as I say, to totally ban, but in about 2 weeks' time, generally I'd say I've had some relative success up to having students, a friend of another student taking the student's phone from them because they're using it and handing it to me. And I just put it on the table at the front. It does take some work, but I think it's a matter of fostering this, where, you know, this healthy relationship in the class about using the phone and not just trying to ban it outright or treating them like children, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Oh, Caroline.
Hi, I teach in an undergraduate first year program, and because I have weekly quizzes, so the students actually make use of the laptop, and in some cases, even though I have ensured that students cannot turn on their mobile phones, but they still go ahead because they didn't bring their laptop, so they use their mobile phone to double up as their laptop. So I think after a while, I suppose the essence of holding a technological tool is such a close tool to them that they can't do without. So I have really given up trying to say no mobile technology, because if I have I suppose, an item in mind that they will turn to technology to make use of, you know, by all means, have your technology with you. So I think in a case like this, it's just how creative we are in teaching processes, you know, that enable the technology to be used, so that students are not seen as, you know, being taken away from them, a tool that is so essential to them. Yeah, so I think in this sense, I don't know, maybe as teachers we might have to adapt, you know, to the reality of what technology is doing today.
And just to add to that very briefly, before we move to the next comment, I think to some extent it's also part of the transition to university, where students are going through this change from a very teacher-directed approach to a more self-directed approach, and there is the expectation that they need to own their learning and they need to become professionals. Part of the professionalism, I guess, is also knowing how to use technology and when and how it's appropriate, because as business professionals they need to know that as well.
Hi, I'm Linda. I teach English to foreign students. One problem I have with technology is that it is so prone to abuse. The translation technology now is very advanced. So when students don't, when their command of English is not so good, what they do is they just take the phone, go over the text, and everything that gets translated into their language, it defeats the whole purpose of trying to teach them reading skills or anything like that. That's why sometimes an outright ban is necessary. I'm not saying that it is always necessary, but I think it depends on what you're trying to teach at that point in time. Also, when we are writing essays, we need to be mindful of how technology can be used to help in academic misconduct. So, you know, whenever you invent something, there will always be benefits, and there'll be always people who try to game the system, and it's always a one-upmanship. So I'm very concerned about how technology is developing and how it is limiting our students' ability to learn.
I don't have an answer to Linda's question. I don't think anyone here has an answer to that question. I think it's actually a question that all of us are asking, and we will continue to ask, because how technology develops is not something we have within our control. It's totally beyond our control, right? But I do want to just maybe add a little something that I learned from my interactions with some teachers from China. I had the fortune of having some time communicating with a group of teachers, secondary school teachers from the southern part of China. One of the things I learned from them was that, and the southern part of China, mind you, is more developed than the northern part of China, okay? That in their schools, in their secondary schools, up to high school, the students are not allowed to bring their phones and use it in their classrooms. They're not allowed. They can do it outside the classrooms, but within the classrooms, the teachers don't allow it, and they will confiscate. And that actually, for me, as someone in the university, as learning advisor in university who supports Mike with the ELPP when he's not able to do it, it suddenly made me realize why, for the mainly mainland Chinese students who come from that context and suddenly into a context, in a university context where we don't have a rule about the use of their mobile phones in the classroom, is, you know, it's like when a child is allowed only to do this and nothing more. That child does not know how to manage boundaries for himself or herself. And then suddenly, the boundaries are removed. Completely removed. And the child is free to do anything. You know what happens, right? When you give a child, suddenly you're allowed only 2 pieces of candy a week. And all of a sudden you say you can eat anything you like, and you put the child in a candy shop. First thing that happens is the child goes a bit crazy, right? Isn't it? And actually, I think that's what happens, is that when you don't allow students to learn how to manage technology bit by bit, we get that kind of problem, perhaps. I'm just coming from a child psychology point of view, that perhaps you do get that problem. So you have students who just use it because they weren't allowed to use before. So perhaps maybe the way forward for all of us doing what we do is we might just need to have to learn how to use that technology in the classroom. And if we have to stop it for a certain period of time because it's required for that part of the lesson, we appeal to the students, put it to side. We're going to do it without for the time being. And then when we're done with that, let them bring it back on again. And as we sit here, keep abreast with the newer versions of what you're using. I don't think there's a necessity to keep changing the tools you use just because there are newer and newer tools out there. You want to know some of the newer tools. But I think if you're very, very comfortable with Kahoot and you've been using it for the last 5 years, you just keep yourself abreast with the newer versions that come on and get better at using it and the newer versions for what you do. Because I think that's the way really forward for all of us to learn how to manage the technology tools that we have in our classroom. We're not going to be able to use, as teachers, I don't think you're going to use every single tool you find in the learning technology platform that's there in your university or your institution. You probably look at the tools in there and then choose what you want to use. And I think that's the best thing. Choose, master it, and make sure you use it to the best. I mean, that's what I did when I insisted that I wanted the students to use the mobile phones in class. I had to give my assurance that they would not be using it for anything else. Then I just told the students, use it for anything else, I take it out, you lose your tools. Use it properly, you don't lose your tools. And I appeal to the students that you want to use your tools or you don't use your tools. You want to use your tools to really learn, then you behave yourselves. You don't behave yourselves, I take it all out. Then I tell them, you continue to misbehave yourselves, I can't take it out, you lose me. Well, okay, we won't come to that part. But anyway, that's it. So at this point here, in the time exigency, okay, I would just like to conclude this part. Thank Devi and Esther for their contributions, and perhaps just summarize that when we're looking at technology, educational technology, learning technology, perhaps the thing to remember is that they're tools. And a new facet, which Esther brought up, is about data. That now it's not just the use of technology, but with the digital platforms that we have today, it's the data that we can draw from those technological tools and the way they're used by us and by our students to enhance and add on to how we can use those tools to help the students achieve their learning outcomes. And so with that, thank you.
Just one more thing. We'll share the results of the Mentimeter with you later. We got a bit caught out with no break and having no time to bring it up on the screen. So we'll do that and share it later with you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow teachers, fellow learning advisors, imagine a wonderful idea. I'd like to read my script. Imagine a wonderful idea or thought that came out of a sudden, but not pursued, and it faded away. What would you feel? Regret, perhaps? This symposium was a nugget of wisdom 3 or 4 years ago. We thought this will not be realized. But today is a testament that we at the Learning Center held on to this nugget of wisdom despite the circumstances. All because we believe it is relevant to us and it's meaningful to our lives as teachers. That is why today it happened, and I would like to thank you all for actually coming over to listen, to ask questions, to interact. The crucial question though would be, where are we heading? What comes next? To continue the discourse of learning and development, the discourse of learning professionals in the academic space, what would be our next steps? So I would like to ask a very bold question. Is there someone in the audience who would like to accept the challenge of continuing the discourse through a symposium, a panel discussion, a teaching and learning conference? What I can say on behalf of JCU Singapore is we will be happy to collaborate and to support you. But really, the real challenge after today is what's next? Okay? You may not have any answer for now, but maybe tonight, when you go to deep slumber, a thought will knock on your head and you cannot afford to lose. So thank you, and please join us for lunch outside.